Greetings once again from Gentleman Jim the Tailor and
Victoria Baylor, dressmaker, professional dressmaker.
pretty one too.
Oh, you're so sweet. We're here, of course, for another episode of the Tailor and the Dressmaker show. Just excited to be with you another week. Thanks for tuning in, not considering that robbery.
Yeah.
Today's show is going to be pretty exciting, huh, Mr. Jim?
You know, it really is, and
It is.
you'll know as we go along there.
That's right. Today's show is actually centered around, we're going to call it Troubleshooting 101.
101.
So when you hear 101, I always think about college classes. It's kind of like that base level class, right?
Yeah.
So we're going back to the basics in this show. And in this show, we are targeting people or individual sewers that have an issue, like a repetitive sewing issue. How do they figure out and solve the problem that they have? Where do they go in their thinking? How do they figure out what the problem is? That whole thing. It's like an entanglement, isn't it, Mr. Jim?
Yeah. For the past couple of weeks, and for some time now, I get a lot of phone calls, I get a lot of emails, I get a lot of text messages, and it all stems around Sewing 101. Why?
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you do? So this morning we want to hopefully answer some of the questions. We can't answer them all because we have to go along, but we want to answer some of the questions that keep coming up.
That's right. And see, the thing is this, what we're trying to allude to, so we'll be a little bit more clear, is that problems are going to happen in your sewing. There's just hands down, they will come. You don't have them, they're coming. Well, usually with problems, you always have to think about how do you solve a problem. So what we want to do is kind of train your way of thinking that when you encounter a problem, especially one that you repetitively encounter, it's almost like the stop, drop, and roll principle. You got to put out the fire. So you got to stop what you're doing, and we want you to think about what it is. And what we're going to kind of focus on today is you can only have pretty much two types of problems, right, Mr. Jim? You can either have a technical problem, so that stems back to the basics, which Mr. Jim teaches and preaches, and, we're all acquired to, but that's straight sewing and, everything that goes with that. Or you can have another problem with your sewing, which is more of a characteristic related problem. So that's something that's not really your inability to sew straight, it's just a characteristic of that problem that's creating an issue for you. You want to elaborate on that?
Well, the sewing part, I will never stop saying, you have to learn how to sew straight. Now I'm going to leave off the other end of it, which I always say the key elements are sewing straight, learning how to set in a zipper, and pockets. The reason why I'm going to leave the last two off, the zipper and the pockets, now we'll get back to that, is because if you can't sew straight, setting them in and they're crooked, it has no value. Has no value.
And speaking of that is, and the reason we're stopping everything, because we had some other ideas for today's show, but Mr. Jim kept getting an overwhelming inquiry about people trying to perform the same task, whether it's putting in a zipper, setting in a pocket, but they do it over and over again and get the same results. And we know what Einstein said, to do anything over and over again and get the same results is pretty much insanity.
That's it.
We don't want nobody operating out of insanity. That's where you're supposed to stop, evaluate, determine whether it's a fundamental issue, it's technical, or if it's a characteristic issue, something that's related to the project, whether it's fabric, design style, that's giving you an issue. So our wonderful Mr. Jim is actually going to give a nice demonstration. So we're going to go, unless you want to say something else, Mr. Jim, about this?
Before I'm going to give a demonstration on what can happen is, I don't want to sound like a broken record. Now the reason why I say that is because I ask the people that contact me, well, what seems to be going wrong? Well, they tell me all the time, I have to keep taking it out. That's a reason. Why are you taking it out? Most of the time, you're taking it out because it's not set in straight, it's crooked. And you look at the stitch, you see it's crooked, you take it out again, you sew it. Well, if you sew it back crooked, you got to take it out again. That's why I say it's so important to learn that. So with that, I'm going to show you a few things that I do and how I do them. You remember I told you guys that I work with these 10 fingers. They become pins, guides, and moving. So let's go and take a look at that.
Before we do, real quick, I feel like someone behind that camera lens is asking, how do I know if it's me versus like the characteristic stuff, the fabric or, you know, the design that I'm not quite getting?
Mm-hmm.
It's an easy test to figure out if fundamentally you're having trouble with sewing straight. You can, of course, test out on a sheet of paper, a lined paper.
There you go.
Just sew along the lines. If you notice you weave in and out the lines, well, then that's just something that's the issue. And then at least you know where to focus your attention.
You know how to focus?
But to kind of mention, there are those gray areas where, say for instance, if you are technically sound, you're an experienced sewer, you sew straight, but you sew with a fabric that makes it really difficult to sew. And as you maneuver with that, it kind of, there's some little jerks and bumps and stuff. You know, those areas exist, but Mr. Jim is going to demonstrate exactly how you can use your hands, which is what he was going to do before I interrupted him, to actually avoid those pitfalls. So we're going to go on over to the table with him now.
All right, now, every time I do a demonstration or I talk about something, I always show the importance of what I was talking about, how important it is for you to get your mechanics working right. Now, here, I'm going to do a quick demonstration of when I'm talking about sewing straight. Now, I have the machine threaded at this time. Most of the time when you practice without the thread and you just look for the needle perforations. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to talk about. Now, as you see, I have the lines to help me. But when you're sewing something, you don't have those lines. I've changed my teaching methods to now include putting lines on things. You can use chalk or you can use one of the invisible markers that Pilot makes. If you don't have a line to work with, put you a line so people can see where you're going. Now, this practice purpose thing here shows you sewing straight. When you put a zipper in, it must be put in straight. Now, some people use a pinning method, but I've gotten to the point now where I'm having all of my students now baste things in. Here's what happens when you start to pin. People put pins, they put them straight, they put them sideways, they put them to where it impedes your stitching with a pin. Now, if you use a baste in, everything must be straight. Now, I'm going to baste this one in real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. If you baste the garment in, then you have to sew it in straight. So what I do is I baste it in place, and once again, keeping everything straight, you have to use either an imaginary eye so that when I baste it in, that I baste it in straight. If I baste it in straight, I should sew it straight. Now, it takes the same amount of time to baste it as to pin it. Now, I have all of these demonstrations where you see the whole process. I have them on YouTube, I have them on Gumroad, got them everywhere. Now, here's the reason why I say basting it. Pinning it, you have to hold it in place to get the pin down. Basting it takes the same amount of time. The difference is that when I baste it in place, it's actually a little more secure. So, with that said, as I baste it in place, and make sure when you baste something that is tacked on both ends to keep that in. So rather than knot it, I just put a couple of threads there. Now look at what happens. It is secure. Sometimes if you put a pin here, let's put a pin there, you'd have to put a lot of pins to get that many stitches in. Most of the time people put a pin here and a pin there, and it shifts on the underside. So to get it to where I have it basted, you'd have to put a pin there, a pin there, a pin there, a pin there, and a pin there. This way, and this way only, is the whole thing secure because it's basted all the way down, rather than the pins. Now, I can baste it in the same amount of time I could put those pins in. Then, when I start to stitch it, I have to also stitch it and get it straight. And I'm just going to do one side. See? Now, right now, I'm using a guide here. I'm not really looking at the needle. I'm looking at the edge so that I sew it in straight. Now this is very, 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 very important. And this is why I demonstrate like this. Because, once again, if I do not sew it straight, see? If I don't sew it straight, what do I have to do? I got to pick that out and get it in there straight, because that's a stitch that's very visible. So that's why it's important to make sure that your mechanics on what you do is correct. Now, that's one side. Okay. Now, I'm going to go and show you what I mean by steering opposed to guiding. When you guide it, you let the feed dog or the teeth pull it forward. When you steer it, you're trying to do this to make it happen. The teeth on the sewing machine will automatically pull it forward, see? So I don't have to really steer it. All I've got to do is let the feed dog pull it forward. Okay? Now, you see what I'm talking about? Not doing this, not pushing it forward, just let it automatically do. What you need to do is guide it. And usually you're guiding it along the edge. You're looking at the edge of whatever size seam or line, imaginary line that you put there. So you're guiding it. Don't push it. Let it pull. See, it'll automatically pull it forward. Automatically. Now, this is what I'm talking about, different consistencies in fabric. One is very slippery. This is a velour type fabric. With a velour, you have to really use your hands, Or, like I say, baste it down. If you baste it down, what you're going to do is you're going to keep the two edges, that's the one you can see and the one you can't see. Because this is what happens. You start looking at it on this side, but when you flip it over, it's moved on you. So your seams aren't even anymore. If you baste them down, then you keep them even. Now, I use my hands a lot. Because when I start stitching, one of the things that I do is I always use one to guide, one to flip, make sure that the edge stays on the edge. That's why I say I use very little pins. Some things I don't pin at all. When I have a fabric like this, This is what happens, this is what I do. I hold the edge down with my fingers and I stitch. Now I'm keeping both sides held down by just using my fingers like pins or needles to hold the edge down. This type of fabric, it is better to baste, but if you don't baste it, then you need to hold it down just like that. That's like anchoring them down. And I use my fingers like pins to bring it down. Now, pretty close, see, all the way down. This is what you want to do. Those, my friends, are what I concentrate, and this is what I tell sewers. This is where you don't have a problem. If your stitch is running like this, and it goes in and it goes out, what do you have to do? You have to take it loose from here to wherever it straightens back out, and you got to re-stitch it in there. This is the time loss. This is the time management that I always talk about. Either you can guide it with your fingers, holding it down tight enough, or baste it in place. Those are some of the habits. Everybody's telling me the same thing. Everybody's telling me the same thing. So those are just a few of the pointers that I want to talk about. Thank you very much. Stay tuned. But this is what people have been calling me about over and over again. I hope that was informative to you. I hope my little demonstration gave you a little insight on what I'm talking about. I don't want to sound like that's all I talk about, because guess what? That's all I talk about. And the reason is, you guys are requesting to learn how to do this at a rate where it looks more professional. I don't have all the answers. I just tell you what works for me and what works for my students. My students are excellent straight sewers because we go over this and we get it. Then when they set a zipper in, the zipper looks better because it's set in straight. When they set a pocket in, when the edges of the garments are even. These are the things that I teach, and this makes your garment look more professional. Now, for as long as I've been in this industry, that's the number one thing what people fall short of the mark in. For you guys who keep saying, oh, I want to sew like you, you have to do what I do. I'm not saying that my way is the only way. Whatever gets you straight in the path, do it. But get in that path, it will make your life easier. I'm telling you, you have to trust me that it will make your life easier.
Well, and then to your point, and the usually with any good teacher, they can tend to see things that the student doesn't. And the fact that a lot of students have come to him in this capacity, really not trying to beat a dead horse. So we want you to know that we're honestly not trying to say that, but oftentimes, to your point, people will start a project, hit a bump, drop the project, run to another project, and they take the same problems with them without realizing it's an actual technical issue, not so much a project-related issue. Right. We just want you to be able to figure out the difference between either or. If you're an experienced sewer, then please bypass this advice. You probably got it down pat. But there are a lot of beginner and intermediate sewers that are starting to hit those rough patches because they happen. I remember when I was sewing and I was making pants, I hit a rough patch in the fitting department. I just wasn't getting it right. I didn't understand it. What I did was I stopped sewing pants. I went back to the books, I began to study, and then I started fitting or figuring it out and understanding, and then jumped back on. But the first thing I ruled out, it wasn't a sewing issue. It wasn't a technical issue. It was just understanding how to fit, which is a whole nother issue on the side. We're not even covering that.
We're going to do that fit one-on-one too.
We will be doing fitting. So anyway, so this would just help those. There's someone out there that's been really struggling. Just stop what you're doing. Think about it. Is it technical or is it just characteristic problem? And if it's characteristic problem, those are easy to solve too. There are some excellent books out there where they're fabric guides. I sewed with rayon velvet for the first time last year doing ballet costumes, and all I can say is stretch rayon is that I hate it. And the reason was even as an experienced sewer as myself, working with it for the first time, I mistook its characteristics to be a little bit like cotton velvet, totally different. And had I just came out the gate and just basted it together, it would have solved a lot of problems. But the fabric grew, and then I had to, use a little bit of professionalism to figure it out, and it worked out fine. But just to show you, all of us have to deal with that. We bump into something, there's an issue. Just always think about, how are you approaching it? How are you attacking the problem when there is a problem?
Yeah.
That's what this is. Troubleshooting 101. Go back to the
101.
basics.
Go back to the basics.
That's right.
Thank you very much. Once again, gentleman Jim the Tailor.
And Victoria Baylor, the Dressmaker. And before we cut out, just one last thing. We have some announcements, of course. Stay tuned for future shows. Second announcement is I released my new Sewing with Crystals and Rhinestones course, which I'm pretty excited. I did.
I saw it,
Well, thank you. If you're interested in making gowns, things like that, crystals are a great way to adorn those. Check that out. And then there was something else I was going to say, and it just slipped my mind. But stay tuned for everything.
Stay tuned, because we have an exciting year in front of us.
That's right.
We've got, I won't even say, just stay tuned and you'll find out.
Okay, so in closing, as we usually do, we like to leave a little bit of something motivational for you. Mine to you is that, as always, God has given you amazing gifts and talents, whether it's in sewing or something else. Please take them, go and do something amazing.
Do something amazing.
That's right.
This is all I have. This is where it comes from. It works from here, through here, through here. I keep telling people, I don't do it. Holy Spirit guides me this way. Thank you very much.
Share your gifts. All right, we love you guys. See you next episode. Bye.